All right, today we're going on a little journey. We're going to follow the entire life cycle of a modern cyber threat. I'm talking from that first tiny, deceptive click all the way to the super complex defenses designed to stop these attacks in their tracks. So, let's dive right in.
So here's the plan. We'll start with a sneaky trick called ClickFix, then talk about why your browser is kind of like an open door. We'll dissect a real-world threat, see how digital detectives track down the bad guys, rethink what it means to trust anyone on a network, and wrap it all up with a look at the future of cyber defense.
Okay, first up, the ClickFix deception. We're talking about the lure. And the first step in almost any attack isn't some crazy, complex code. Nope. It's usually all about playing with our minds, plain and simple psychology.
So let me ask you this. Could something as simple as a copy and paste compromise your entire system? I know, it sounds almost ridiculous, right? Too easy. But this is the key to one of the fastest growing attacks out there right now. And the answer, which is kind of scary, is a big yes.
And this technique has a name. ClickFix. Honestly, it's kind of brilliant in a sinister way, because it takes our normal, everyday online habits and turns them against us. Think about it. We've all been trained to solve those wacky CAPTCHA puzzles or follow instructions to fix some website error. Well, attackers just slipped in a new, fake step. They'll tell you, hey, just copy this text, open your developer console, and paste it to continue. And of course, you do it. You think you're fixing a problem, but what you're really doing is unlocking your front door and inviting them right in. And get this, the growth rate is just staggering. We're talking a 517% increase in these attacks in just the last 6 months. 517%. So yeah, this isn't some theoretical thing that might happen. It's exploding right now for one very simple reason. It just works.
And that one little copy-paste action, it can unleash some seriously devastating stuff. You see, ClickFix isn't the end of the attack. It's just the beginning. It's the delivery system for the whole nasty payload. We're talking info stealers that grab your passwords, ransomware that completely locks you out of your files, remote access Trojans, you name it.
So, okay, the lure tricks the person, but where does the actual delivery happen? Well, think about how you get online. For pretty much all of us, our entire digital life runs through one window, the web browser. And that, my friends, makes it the #1 entry point for attackers.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, I keep my browser updated. I'm good, right? Well, not so fast. There's this super critical window of time called the patch gap. It's like a race. A vulnerability is found. On average, it takes the software vendor about 15 days to create and release a fix. But guess what? It only takes the attackers about 17 days to figure out how to exploit that vulnerability. And that doesn't even count the time it takes for your company to actually test and deploy the patch. All that time in between, that's your window of exposure. And for an attacker, that little window is basically a wide open door.
And this patch gap is exactly what allows for something called a drive-by download. The name says it all, really. You just visit a website that's been compromised. You don't click on a specific download, you don't approve anything, and boom, malicious software gets on your machine. All it takes is that one unpatched vulnerability in your browser for the site to silently run bad code in the background. It's scary stuff.
All right, let's make this all a bit more concrete. I want to show you how this all works in the real world by looking at one specific threat the security pros are fighting all the time. It's a piece of malware called Sock Ghoulish.
So here's how the Sock Ghoulish attack usually goes down. First, the lure. You're on a totally legitimate website, maybe a news site you trust, when a pop-up appears. Urgent! Your browser is out of date. Click here to install the update. That's the drive-by download part. So you click, you download what you think is a real update, and you run it. And that's it. Game over. The attackers now have their initial foothold on your machine. From there, they can deploy whatever they want, usually the heavy hitters like Cobalt Strike or, even worse, full-blown ransomware.
And once they're inside, that's when the real damage starts. Just take a look at this. This is an actual PowerShell command used by Sock Ghoulish, all decoded. What does it do? It's a clever little script that automatically sticks a hidden malicious link into the victim's email signature. So now, every single time that person sends an email, the person who receives it, well, their computer tries to load that invisible link. And when it does that, it can accidentally leak network credentials right back to the attackers. It's so stealthy and honestly a pretty brilliant way to steal info.
Okay, so the attack happened. The damage is done. Now what? The big question is always, who did this? And this is where the job shifts from defense to detective work. We're talking digital forensics and trying to figure out attribution.
But let me tell you, attribution is incredibly hard. The attackers, especially the really well-funded groups, don't exactly leave fingerprints or a business card. They design their tools to be impossible to trace. And even when all the evidence points to a specific group or even a nation-state, well, you can bet they're going to deny everything. It's just standard practice.
So how in the world do investigators connect the dots? Well, one really cool technique is called binary stylometry. The easiest way to think about it is like handwriting analysis, but for computer code. See, even after a programmer writes their code and it gets compiled into a program you can run, they leave behind these unique little fingerprints. Their personal habits, the specific tools they like to use, even the common mistakes they make over and over. And by finding these fingerprints, researchers can link two completely different pieces of malware and say, hey, the same person or the same team built both of these.
Here's a perfect example of how this works. Investigators were looking at 3 different types of malware: Nbot, Bunny, and Babar. At first glance, they look totally unrelated. One was used for network attacks, another for spying, completely different jobs. But when they did that code handwriting analysis, they found all these undeniable links. They shared the same CNC commands, they handled memory the same way, the evidence was clear as day. Even though they had different missions, they were all cooked up in the same kitchen by the same team.
So, understanding the threat is one thing. But how do we actually stop it? Well, the fact that these threats are always changing has forced a massive shift in how we approach defense. We've had to move away from old ideas and towards a new model called Zero Trust.
Let's just look at the difference here. On the left, that's the old way of doing things. It's called the castle and moat model. You build this one really strong wall around your whole network. The problem? If an attacker gets over that wall, they're inside the castle, and they can run around and do whatever they want. Now look at the right. That's Zero Trust. Instead of one big wall, the network is chopped up into tiny, isolated little zones. So if an attacker breaks into one little room, well, that's all they get. They're trapped. They can't get to any of the other rooms.
And the philosophy behind it is really simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. It's just never trust, always verify. That's it. It means we throw out the old idea that if you're inside the network, you must be a good guy. Nope. Now, every single user, every device, every app has to prove who they are every single time they try to access anything. No exceptions.
So to build a defense like this, you first have to learn to think like the attacker. And defenders use tools like this one. It's called an attack tree. Basically, they sit down and map out every single possible path an attacker could take to get to a specific target. In this case, the goal is to view a security camera.
And when you do this analysis, the results are just wow. Take a look. Before Zero Trust, an attacker had a bunch of options. They could try to access the camera directly. They could sniff the network to steal data, or they could hop over from another compromised computer. But look at the after column. Once you put in that Zero Trust microsegmentation, every single one of those paths is just gone. It's impossible now. The camera's in its own little bubble, the PC isn't allowed to talk to it, the network is just fundamentally more secure.
Okay, so we've gone on quite a journey here, all the way from a simple copy-paste trick to a complete teardown and redesign of network security. Let's quickly recap what we've learned.
First off, and this is a big one, attacks are increasingly all about human psychology. The bad guys are exploiting us, not just our computers. Second, your web browser, that is the new battleground. That's where the fight is happening. Third, the way we defend ourselves is changing. We're moving away from building bigger walls and focusing instead on identity. Who are you, and should you be here? And finally, figuring out who's behind these attacks is this amazing, super complex digital detective story.
And all of this really brings us to one final big question. Never trust, always verify. It's a fantastic defense strategy, but it also raises a really fundamental challenge for us. In a world built on zero trust, how do we decide who do we let in?